Ladies and gentlemen, guys and girls, welcome back to the Age of Warfare podcast. And as you can see, Nee Edwards has finally managed to join us. Thank you, Nee. And this was actually Nee's wonderful idea. And so on this episode is going to be part one of what's going to be a multi-part series of Alexander the Great and his father, Phillip II. Because as we know, Alexander the Great was one of the most iconic generals in ancient history as he marched the Macedonian Empire all the way to Persia and into India. So, but of course, the one character that we don't really speak too much about is his father, Philip II of Macedon. So, the way it's going to work, guys, before we get into it, is we're going to put the first three parts are going to be Philip II. Then we're going to get into why he was killed and the conspiracy theories behind it. Then we'll jump on to 3 to 4 parts of Alexander and the same thing. So, it's, you guys are going to be in for quite the ride as we travel in a Macedonian Greek history, as we transfer from the beginnings of the Macedonian Empire all the way to Alexander's conquest of Persia into India and what came after Alexander, such as the Seleucid Empire and all that. So before we get started, how are you guys doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Good. I'll see my camera's off today. We're getting a kitchen refit. Woohoo! Finally, as well. So flat's a bit messy, so camera's off. But so it's doing it that way, guys. But I am here. You can still hear me. Just to be able to see my lovely face.
Yep, I'm really excited about doing this podcast. Honestly, without Philip II, Alexander the Great, I don't think does what he does. So I think it's great that we're starting with Philip II and then going on. So definitely excited to do this.
So to build some context for the audience here, Philip II was born in 382 BC in Macedon, which is of course modern day Greece now, but it was part of the Macedonian Empire. And he was born during the rise of Macedon. And it was pretty much the beginning of the classical, era of Greece, the rise of Macedon, and it gave birth to the Hellenic Empire, the Hellenic era. Which Aiden, you might be familiar with that term, the Hellenic Empire.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, the Hellenic era. Mm-hmm. So basically, I want to bring up a question. Why is it that we don't know too much about Philip II? Why you think that's the case?
In my opinion, we don't hear about him because he was overshadowed by his son, Alexander the Great. Even though without Philip II, like I said before, I don't think there's really an Alexander the Great. That's just my opinion, but he's overshadowed by his son, so that's why we really don't hear about him.
Yeah, to me, it's very much like Lee. I think part of it is where Philip came from and where he started was there was a lot of kingdoms in the area, and you had a lot of leagues around Greece that were all doing very similar things at the same time. And what he did for he was very successful in what he did. But what he did for, say, the first half of his reign wasn't actually that different from a lot of the other people at the time. So people sort of go, oh, he was, if you know about this area of history, you would know about him. But it's said his later stuff that's very important is very linked to Alexander, obviously, and what Alexander ended up doing. So, as Lee said, it gets overshadowed by that because it's all, oh, well, Philip did this. But then Alexander took it and then went and did this with it. And sort of the greatest achievements of Philip tend to get tied into later stuff. So all we really have as Philip is not much different from what a lot of other people were doing at the time. Just take Rome, for example. This is a period where Rome's having the Latin Wars, Samnite Wars, all of those bits of Rome. And people can't really, if you ask the person on the street, they would barely know about those wars. They get a rough idea it was the Republican forming Rome, possibly, but they wouldn't be able to name people. I have quite a lot of difficulty naming specific people at that time as it is. So he's one of that set of people. You see the names, you go, oh, that person. But I think that's what the big problem is when you look at Philip is that he straddles those two bits. That his best stuff is obviously overshadowed.
Yeah, to pretty much set the scene as well. Alexander the Great is popular for taking over the Persian Empire, but when Philip II was around, their biggest enemy wasn't the Persians; it was the Thracians to the north, the invading Thracians. And to the north. Well, ironically, modern day Byzantium, Constantinople, which is today Istanbul, was the capital of the Thracian Empire. Ironically.
Yeah, it's that's when you get into the Byzantines as well. That is actually a very specific region named after the Thracians. As part of the Byzantine areas, it was Thraxicon Athene. It was called. And it was very, very, very important for them as well. Obviously, going right up to the walls of Constantinople, it would be.
So a couple of things. Philip II was born, and he had two older brothers, Alexander II and Pericles III, who was the king of the Hellenistic kingdom of Macedonia from 365 BC to 360 BC. So he had a couple of brothers already, who were kings already. So he was born. You could say he was born into royalty. You can say.
It's one of the things that when you look at say Greece, for example, and the way that people came into power in different city-states is something. We think about that sort of in a very modern context, because a lot of our modern world is based on those Greek political ideals. And the Romans obviously very similar in the way that they came about. Whereas Macedonia's got some of that, but also has a little bit to, as obviously Angel said, about the Thracians to the north. There's interconnection there. And then obviously with the Persians as well to the east, there's influence for those peoples, because yes, this area was ruled by these people and so on and so forth. Right. But obviously the people intermixed in the areas. And so you get these situations where you get a royal family, and it's full of these princes and kings of small kingdoms or bigger kingdoms, and then the strife between those. Everyone knows about a lot of the Persians, especially when you get to the Ottomans, that the Sultan dies and then all of the princes go at each other until there's only one standing. And you get quite a lot of an element of that within Macedon at the time as well.
Aidan, you mentioned the Romans were dealing with the Latin wars, and I bring that up because the region of modern day Greece was dealing with the same thing. The Macedonians were dealing with the Athenians, the Spartans to the south, the Athenians to the southeast. The Thracians had sacked the eastern part of the Macedonians. And then you had the Illyrians, which is in the modern day Croatia, Bosnian, Balkans area, the Illyrians. So they were dealing with their own version of the Latin wars. They were dealing with their own version.
Yeah. It's a period with it's like we talked about after the collapse of the West. Or even when we were talking in the recent episodes about the collapse of the Soviet Union, where you've got these states that are kind of states, and they're just trying to settle themselves as to who they are and the power structure in the region. That there's a lot of these regional powers of these people that are up and coming, but then you've got the people that are already there, and them trying to control their territory with lots of marriage alliances, small wars leading to big wars, alliances. All of those things. It's a very, very, very convoluted and interesting bit of history, actually, this whole lead up bit, which could be another reason why people don't talk about Philip as much, because when you talk about Alexander, it's a bit more cut and dried of you talk about, he got an army and he went and did these conflicts and he was fighting these people and those people took this area. It's a lot easier to understand. But when you're talking about, Philip his brother was king of this area, who actually was connected to the people fighting the Romans in the Samnite Wars. And then you've got this person over here who was fighting the Thracians with that as well. And then you've got these leagues all over Greece, and they were part of one of them, but not part of this other one. And that alliance is it becomes complicated. And those complicated bits of history, there's the big player in the middle of those is hard to see, as I said before, is identifying those big players because it's easier to learn history on the big man theory of there's this person that did a thing.
Yeah, I wanted to share my screen here for a moment. Let's see if you guys can see it. If it pops up for you guys, there we go. This is the map of Greece during the 359 BC. Obviously, you see Macedonia, what is this little area, and then you got all the Greeks, the Greek city-states, the Empire of Epirus, Illyria. Then you got the mighty Thracians, and it's funny, Aiden, because you see, Byzantium was actually controlled by the Greeks.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to hold it back from the Thracians. And it's funny because in Rome Total War, I'm jumping here. You could. The Byzantine is actually controlled by the rebels, and as the Thracians, you kind of ordered to take over Byzantium as the Thracians if you play the Thracian campaign. So a little bit of, and then you see this little snivel here is Scythia, and they will play a bigger role later on, the Scythians, and then the Persians all to the east. So I just wanted to show off the map of how the map set the stage of what Philip II had to deal with, and then above here.
Bits, sorry, just quickly, one of the interesting bits, obviously, say with Byzantium at that point being controlled by the Greeks, that's actually the Athenians, because it was set up as a logging colony, because that's when the Athens and Sparta were at war, many hundreds of years beforehand. When they were at war, the Athenian strength was obviously their navy, and that's how they would try to defeat the Spartans. But obviously, Greece isn't well known for very easy logging for ships.
No.
Well. It's got enough wood for some purposes, but for logging. Whereas obviously, as you go up into the Bosphorus and around the Black Sea area, there's large forests that you can then use for logging. You've got nice big straight trees. So that's why the Greeks were up that far. And it is obviously, as I said, it's all connected to Athens pushing up there, and Athens' allies as well, which then obviously will become important later on as we go along with this this bit of history.
Yeah. And I wanted to bring up, because I know Lee wanted to do the subject so badly, and I can understand why, because Philip II, he was 21 years old. I mean, what we were doing at the age of 21. I mean, yeah, yeah, okay, but but the idea is he came in at a very tough time for the Macedonians, because this red area was under his control. This is upper red area were independent tribes. So you didn't even have all of Macedonia under your control. You had some rebel settlements that were under rebel control. So even though it was kind of the most dangerous time, he came up as a 21-year-old king. And he at a very young age, he was able to use his diplomatic skills. He bought off the Thracian king with gifts and persuaded him to put to the death the first Macedonian pretender to the throne. At the Thracian court. So he actually paid off the Thracians, which is why the Thracians never really conquered Macedonia, because he would bribe them.
Well, Philip II took power.
Which is something, I never knew that. I'll be honest, when I was researching, I never knew that. Go on,
I was just going to say, Philip II took power in 359 BC, and almost immediately he was responsible for the reformation of the army of Macedon. And when he went up, he inflicted so much damage on the Greek city-states that they, the part of the, I can't pronounce words for crap, so please bear with me, but the
Chalcidian League?
Yeah, the Chalcidian League, that he destroyed that entire league by himself.
Wow.
And then he invented the, again, can't pronounce for nothing, this Sarissa spear. And he replaced the Dory spear. The Dory spear was usually about 6 foot long, and the Sarissa spear was 16 to 23 foot long. And they used that in the phalanx, the Macedonian phalanx system, and that worked out great. And he is considered, Philip II is considered a master in warfare for everything he did. Like you touched on it earlier, Angel, when you said it's diplomatic. He was known as he could be diplomatic or he could be ruthless. And he did either or, and it made it so he was just that great of a leader by being able to do both of those. And then when he went and invaded, Peonia, and defeated the Elysians
Yes.
battle. That got Athens' attention. And that's when all the he started antagonizing Athens at that point.
One of the interesting bits to do with that is due to, obviously, as you said, his family was royals, and obviously he didn't become king until, obviously, after they weren't really around because they've been killed. But he was a hostage. He was we know it a lot from the medieval period. You go out as a knight, you get defeated, and then your son gets brought up by the other monarch type of thing. They even do it in Game of Thrones. Obviously, Greyjoy, the whole Game of Thrones situation right at the very beginning as well, is a good example of this. And that was a very, very common thing all the way through from this very early period, all the way right up until we're talking it's the 1600s, that sort of stops. But when he was a hostage in this sense, he was in Thebes, and Thebes at the time was as big as Athens or Sparta. So when you ask where were the big important places in Greece, people go Athens or Sparta for a lot of this. But in this period, it's actually Thebes that was actually one of the most important places. And he was there, and it's where he learned a lot of, as you said, obviously through his diplomacy. He learned a lot of that through being trained in Thebes. And it was, this is one thing that's brought up in Wikipedia, actually, says about the sacred band. Obviously, I haven't got into that to confirm it, but obviously Thebes is known for the sacred band. They are a very famous, very good military unit. So obviously it's had an impact of him being there with this very powerful city-state that actually has all of this good martial training as well as diplomatic training. He's obviously taken that as obviously a very intelligent man at the same time, was able to use that when he then gets into power in Greece. So he was kind of said that if he hadn't have been a hostage, there's potential that he wouldn't have been as good as he was, because he may not have seen another way of doing things and been able to come back and go, well, actually, thinking about it, now I've seen this, we could improve in this way to do all of these things. So it's that then interconnection with the rest of Greece, which if you go a lot earlier, Macedonia was just seen as, they're not really Greeks. They're a barbarian tribe that's next to Greece and there's a little bit of influence. Whereas in this period, they are still seen as slightly barbarian, but at the same time, they're seen more as Greeks. They're kind of like you might have in your, say, to use the US as an example, your average redneck. They're the rednecks of Greece, essentially. Yeah. In this time period as well.
I feel attacked.
I'm just comparing you to Philip. It's not a problem.
No,
it was a compliment. But it's that type of attitude of these people are slightly lesser, but that's because that's a social attitude more than a actually factual thing as well. When you actually look into it as well, which obviously redneck's a very good example of this as well in the US as a modern time period, where you get this outside attitude towards it and the stereotype jokes, but when you actually look at it, the people that class as that, there's a lot of people that have come from that background who've actually made big successes of themselves. So it's through that similar sort of process that he's gone and he's seen these other things and he's come back and gone, well, actually, they do these things quite well. Why don't we do that? Because, we can. And if you look at the land area, even when Macedonia is small, when he takes over, that still land area is bigger than is the main bulk of the rest of Greece as we know it as well. So he's got a lot of land and then people within that land to call on. It's not a city-state with colonies in some areas as well. So he's got that power behind him that he can then use without forming a league to create it.
Now, I wanted to bring up the Marian reforms, right? The Marian
Yeah.
reforms when Philip, it was the second, was also kind of responsible for reforming the Greek army, the Macedonian army, the phalanx. He popularized the phalanx formation, and that's why the Greeks are so associated with the phalanx formations. It wasn't Alexander; it was his father that invented the phalanx that reformed the Greek army. That he improved the army, and that's why Macedon became such a powerhouse in Greece. I just wanted to bring that up.
It's these experiences, and as Lee was saying, from the factual side of what he actually physically did, obviously, especially with as Lee's highlighted, with changing from what we would consider a spear to what we might consider a pike, as well. That change.
You had the Macedonian. Yeah, you had the Macedonian phalanx, which rivaled that of the Spartan phalanx. That of the Spartans.
Well, yeah, you don't want them getting close. So if you've got a longer spear, it keeps them further away. I mean, it's really logical when you think about it after the fact, but it's coming up with that idea initially. It's the thing is you think how unwieldy that would be. It's like we've all picked up something that's about 6 foot long, like a walking stick, or even you think about it like a large mop or broom or something like that. And fishing rods are another good example of that. They can get unwieldy when they get a bit of extra length. I know they're meant to bend and things, but when you've got a piece of wood that's getting up to Lee, what did you say it was? About 18 foot ish, around
16 to 23 foot.
Yeah, so about that length is, even with the best will in the world, that's going to be waving around. So you've got to have a lot of training to use it. It's like the training someone to use a crossbow compared to training someone to use a longbow. You've got to have training to do it. Well, you've got to have training to use both. Obviously, the longbow is more difficult with this. Obviously, training to use a spear is difficult. Training to use a spear that is 3 times the length of a conventional spear is going to take a lot of effort as well, and a lot of shoulder muscles.
Well, another thing he did, looking at Philip II, we're talking about militarily right there. A strategic military thing that's also diplomacy is when he married Olympias, which was a princess of the Malaysian Empire, if you will. And that stabilized the Western Front and allowed him to turn east at that point, because now the Western Front
back in a sec, guys, just going to grab a drink.
So that was definitely one thing he did that was...
Yeah, that was a very important marriage. I mean, we're talking about a time period where marriage was actually really, really important. Marriage was more than just what we do when we fall in love with someone. It's something like Nietzsche said they used to do for a strategy to build up their, to build up their army, to build up their empire. And I think in 358 BC, I think he married an Illyrian princess at first as well. To try to gain over the Illyrians, but the marriage wasn't very successful. And eventually he marched into the Illyrians in 358 BC anyway, despite the marriage. So, talk about a bad marriage. But he still conquered the Illyrian. The Illyrians.
358, when he conquered them, that's when he started getting the reputation of being a master of warfare.
Yep.
How easily he dispatched them, because that technically shouldn't have happened. That was an underdog fight.
Right.
He took them like they were nothing. And another important thing with history, his marriage to Olympias, if you don't know it, that's Alexander the Great's mother. So that produced Alexander the Great, who we'll be talking about in a few episodes from now.
So an interesting thing when talking about the Illyrians is obviously Lee said he managed to obviously defeat them quite handily, and that's where he got the, oh no, this guy isn't just playing, this guy's very, very good. His marriage obviously stayed off that war for a while. Now, if you think about it, he's doing a lot of reforms to his military. He needs to get his military trained. He needs to be able to drill them. He needs to be able to use them in certain battles, so he can get used to using them before he manages to pull off this victory. that marriage is very political because it's his. The previous king was killed by the Illyrians. It was the Illyrians who had been defeating the Macedonians left, right, and centre up until that point. It was he needed to do something about them. He couldn't just leave them. And as Lee said, it secured his western border because without doing that, he if he hadn't have had that marriage was literally just right. If I marry her, can we just not fight for a bit? And they went, yeah, it's fine. You're never going to be able to defeat us in battle. And he's like, that's what you think.
And in that marriage, it was just a thing of like you said, to do the Western Front. But think about what it did for the history of the world. That marriage did.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, hey, here's a convenience marriage.
Right.
Well, here's world history that we've never seen before.
Because I mean, without that marriage, we might have been talking about the empire of Epirus instead of Macedon quite easily.
Maybe the Persians
wouldn't be Epirus though,
or Persians, that too, right?
Epirus obviously is we everyone in who knows anything about military history will know about Epirus because it's Pyrrhus of Epirus. It wasn't very long before this period, or was he afterwards? I can't remember which. Either way, he's from Epirus. It's Pyrrhus of Epirus is the Pyrrhic victory of fighting against the Romans, and that's where he was from as well. So they weren't exactly a bad military. You think that they handed the Romans arse them every single battle. Obviously, lost the campaign, but as militarily, they weren't a pushover at all either. So he's got these two very, very strong territories to the side. So yeah, there is a potential. They could have then, if they'd have taken over Macedonia, they may have done reforms as well with their military when bringing the Macedonians. Macedonians were big on their cavalry as well,
right?
Which obviously,
I think what Lee says is more correct. That the Persians probably would have, they probably would have been conquering everything and because the Persians had a big empire. I mean, we haven't even touched the Persians yet, but I mean, but Phillip knew of their assistance. He knew that they assisted. He knew.
Yeah, I think the Persian Empire we should do when we're done with Alexander. That'd be a good one to lead us right out of Alexander into the Persians. That'd be great.
Because one of Philip's big plans was to invade Persia, and that's something we'll get to later on, like further down the line. But that was always one of his goals. He needs to do something about them. So as you say, they could have come into Greece. Obviously, we've seen them come into Greece many times as well. As soon as the Persians are stable, they start going west as well. And even later on, with obviously you get a lot of history in between, even fighting against the Romans, there was always that fear that as soon as they got themselves stabilized, they were coming west. And then it happens with the Ottomans as well, far later on as well, with the taking of Constantinople as well. So there's always this big empire to the east that's got to come across that you've always got to have a contingency plan for. It's like all the stuff that the Pentagon probably has in their archives, all the war plans and stuff, for if something like a hot war kicked off with Russia or China or something. It's like the likelihood of that happening is still relatively low despite what's happening in the world. But they've blatantly got plans in there to deal with that because you can't not have those plans lying around. And so Philip, obviously, from a very early time, was thinking about the Persian Empire as part of his consolidation as well. Like even if it was like early on when you get into the sort of like the classical Greek era, that you've got the Greeks along the edge of Anatolia, and there was warfare to hold those Greek city-states. And a lot of that wasn't to invade the Persian Empire and take it over. A lot of that was just to hold that area and stop them coming west. So he would have had plans like that from a very early stage as well.
And it's fun. The funny thing is, I was reading, his brother Alexander II, he was assassinated like he was. It's funny that his older brother was assassinated like he will eventually be Alexander II. It's
basically if you were in charge of Macedonia, you died in battle or you got assassinated. You didn't die in your sleep. It just wasn't a thing for them. Obviously, for a lot of people back then. I do wonder whether that influenced the Roman culture as well, because obviously later on a lot of the imperial Roman culture was influenced by Greece, especially like Hadrian. Hadrian was a big one on Greece and the Greek influence on their culture. So those ideals, this is the era where that sort of thing is the norm. It's not sort of an ideal, oh, I have to die in battle or I have to be assassinated. But it's that becomes if you're doing things right and you're that powerful, that's a thing that is basically going to happen to you at some point.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
But and then Alexander the Great was, of course, Alexander the Third, named after his brother. So just a little trivia there.
Yeah, and then they kept the family name going because Alexander's son was also called Alexander or Alexander the Fourth.
Yeah.
And there was another. Was it Alexander's brother was called Philip the Third as well? Because he was initially the regent. I'll throw that. This is one of the things about that. It's either they're all called Philip or Alexander, which is easy to pronounce.
Yeah.
Or it's all a whole bunch of names that we each have a go at and see which one we can get right, because they're quite complicated names as well. So I say to people, if you want to look up some of this, go for like a Philip or Alexander, and then go and look at the names from there. Don't try typing the names in, because I don't know where you're going to end up on the internet if you do that, and we know what the internet's like.
So I just wanted to show you a map. Give me a minute. Let me just show you a map. So this is in 336 BC. This is what he managed to accomplish. This is the Macedonians in 336 BC, and of course the Thracians are here. So basically, he managed to build a Macedon a little bigger. Now, I know some historians might say that Philip II wasn't as successful. What do you think that might be?
Area of land that Alexander II took over.
Exactly. I was going to say exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Because you're thinking Alexander the Great went all the way to India.
Yeah.
But they had only pretty much stayed in Greece and did all that. But he still did an awful lot. He was still a military genius, diplomatic genius, and he did quite a bit. He does have a little bit of a bad reputation for being a-hole, if you will. And I was reading that he trained. The one reason why his army, we talked about it earlier, something like shoulder muscles and stuff like that, getting that spear up and stuff. I was reading that he trained his armies, like when he reformed them, an ungodly amount. And so that's why they were so precise in what they did, and how a little place like Macedon was able to take over so much stuff. It's because they were so well trained and so well disciplined.
It seems to be a theme that has come up a lot in what we're talking about. So, like with the Romans, it was one of the big conclusions is they were big on their training, their unit tactics, getting them right. It's why they were able to overwhelm odds. Even later on with the British Army, is a heavy focus on training. There was a lot of training that the British Army did. The other armies didn't really go in for. There's even Napoleonic Wars did that, and then obviously in the later wars, because we've always historically had a smaller army, the way that we've been able to do that is use our technology and also our training to be able to do those things. And it seems to be to have a really successful army, you've got to have that big training thing. Like if you look at it, like even the US military is another good example of this. If you look at say the stereotypes that come out of when people think about modern military training, everyone thinks of the US Marine Corps, of how they get trained and how the pressure they're under. And the US Marine Corps have got an incredibly good reputation. They're an incredibly good fighting force. And that is because, again, the training, and they're able to fight bigger odds than they are, again, with better technology than the other side had. So it's that combination that keeps coming up. Again, you just need someone in charge who's able to look outside the box and be able to do those things. Like even Napoleon himself, very good commander, technologically and reforming the forces was and tactics, one of the ways he won. When he started to lose was when he was starting to use conscripts and then just doing the same old tactics because he couldn't do anything else because of the training. So this is something that's coming up time and time again. But Alexander wouldn't have had this training if Philip hadn't have been such a hard ass when it came to the training. He was a proper drill sergeant type when it came to the training as well.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. Philip II, he was never meant to be king. He was not supposed to be a king. No, he was. In fact, he was supposed to be Alexander II and his other brother. They were supposed to take over the throne. Because back then how it worked was the older brother would be king, and then if they die, it would be passed on to the little brother. But in most cases, the little brother never got to be king because the older brother never died. So so Philip II did a wonderful job. He did a lot, considering he was never destined to be king. He was not supposed to happen that way.
Well, no. Also, he actually wasn't supposed to be king at all because he was the regent, and he kind of nicked the kingship as well. So through various shenanigans.
It's basically if my brother were to pass away, my stepbrother were to pass away, and then I become king. I mean, I'm walking in putting notice because I said, "Oh crap! I have no experience. I was never trained because my father never trained me to be king because it was never meant to happen." So I mean, that's why when Neve told me about Philip II, I said, "Oh, I mean, this is going to be really fun to talk about because, you're talking about someone he was supposed to be just a weak-old Greek, Macedonian, maybe an elite, but that's about it. That's about as high as he was supposed to go on the echelon. Now it's like being called up to be king. It's like, oh shit, now I got control of this massive empire. Let's go kick some booty.
Now just take a second, think about how history would have been different if Alexander II would have been taking on Macedon instead of Philip II.
Yeah, right.
How different would that have been? Would have Alexander II been what's the word I'm looking for, ambitious like Philip II? Would he have trained the army like Philip II? Think of just that. In that one moment where he's not supposed to be king, then he becomes king, how that changes the world. I know I just said that earlier about how that whole him marrying Olympias and having Alexander III, Alexander the Great, that changed the world. But think about that, where Alexander II was supposed to take over, and then Philip II takes over, and what he was able to do.
I mean, that's a really good question, Lee. The only problem is he was only king for 2 years. So it's a very small sample size. I mean, the only thing he did was he faced an Illyrian invasion from the northwest and attack from the east. So he managed to survive that. So he had skills, he had the ability, but with such a very small sample size, it's kind of hard to say whether he would have been as good as his brother or not, because
sample size. I'm just saying though, but I mean, it's always easier to defend than it is to go on offense. And Philip II was, if you could say, almost like an offensive guy.
Right.
He went out with his military. Where Alexander II, don't get me wrong, he, like you said, 2 years. That doesn't give us nothing. But all he did was play defense in those 2 years. Where
that's a fair point.
Is it Patton who has the famous? Is it Patton's quote? The best form of defense is a good offense. It's very much Philip is in that mold as well. It's one of the things I was going to bring up. Is saying about Alexander. If you look at it, like he campaigned against the Illyrians, and he did okay, but he didn't conquer them. But if you look later when Philip's dealing with the Thracians and basically kicking the Athenians off of any of that Thracian land, so all those little blue dots we were talking about, Byzantium and all down that coast, his general, there's another war with Illyria where his general's put in charge of the army, and he goes and he absolutely destroys the Illyrians. So I think that it's that magic element of Philip learning about the military and his military reforms that really just dials it up to 11 on them, that they're about a 9 or a 10, that they could defeat these people. They could actually have these brilliant campaigns on two fronts and actually still stand up in the middle. But It's until they have that edge with the Macedonian phalanx and the increase in their cavalry and the very well trained, it becomes the companion cavalry, obviously. Until they have that, they can't really do more than, as we're talking about, they can't really more than just like be on the defensive and the occasional offensive war, but they can't go on the all-out offensive conquering wars to just completely neutralize an area. They can only really sort of a punitive campaign more than anything else, because obviously they've got all these areas around them, and it's what Philip does. He neutralizes this bit and then that bit, and then that leaves him free to neutralize this other bit over here. And then, as said, obviously fighting against the Thracians. Part of that wasn't just fighting the Thracians; it was also kicking the Athenians off of that coast, so that he pushes them back in to Greece. And as Lee said near the beginning of the episode, that's when he starts coming to the attention of these Athenians of, actually, this is a guy we really need to pay attention to with the Athenian League. Like, well, was it the Athenian League was a lot earlier. There were several of them. I'm just going to call it that for ease of working, but I think it had a different name at the time. But them and their allies, they were really, well, we really need to pay attention to what's going on here, because obviously, as I said, he as Lee said earlier, he's already taken out one of these leagues, and obviously he was in Thebes, the Thebans as well, and they were strong. He was able to deal with them fairly easily, and that wasn't just because he knew about them because he was there. I mean, that has got to be part of it, but you've got this. It's all those elements have to be there. It's kind of like talking about the collapse of the Roman Empire, that each of the elements that people bring up in the collapse of the Roman Empire, Rome's dealt with each one of them, or two of them at the same time, multiple times. It's just when they all come together, that's what causes it. I think Philip II was that person that had all of those elements. I think Alexander II would have been a fine ruler. Macedon would have done really well. They'd have probably been a really prominent player in that. But that's as far as it would have gone. They'd have just been really strong, possibly conquered and controlled a chunk of Greece, the rest of Greece. But that's about it, really. I don't think they'd have got that far, because he obviously didn't have that extra edge that Philip had. I think Philip was just that little bit better as well.
Right. To touch on what you said about the Athenian League, in 356 BC, when he took, and again, I can't pronounce Greek names for anything, but the Theocrates. Aiden, help me out here.
All right, sorry, which bit is it? 356, yeah?
Yeah, 356 BC,
the Thessalian League?
No, the Cretes.
The Cretes, yeah. What we're talking about
when he took them, all the people in the area, that's when they really took notice, and they actually made a league with Athens, but then that didn't go anywhere because the smaller nations around him, or states, however you want to say it, didn't want anything to do with attacking Philip II, and Athens wasn't going to do anything at that point in time. So that was the final one before we finally get to see King Philip and Athens say hello to each other, so to speak.
Right.
And just a little trivia. You mentioned Patton earlier and generals and stuff. General Patton actually thought he was General Hannibal, reincarnated.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. He had some ideas, that man.
Yeah, he did. And so I just found that funny that you mentioned Patton in that area, and then that just made me remember his remarks of where Patton, which could be another show, Patton.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Said that he was always reincarnated from generals, and Hannibal was that, and then he got reincarnated to George Patton.
Now, I wanted to build up on what Nee was saying about Anastasia II, because I'm about to throw a bit of a curveball based on what I read just now. It said, at the request of the nation, whatever that. Yeah, Alexander intervened in a civil war in Decene, which was south of Macedon. He actually got involved in a civil war down there, and he gained control of Nassau and several other cities. But here's the difference between Alexander and Philip, and this might be giving us some clues. He betrayed a promise that he had made by putting garrisons in the cities. So yeah, there we go. That that's what some people might say Philip II was actually better because Alexander II kind of fumbled that, and as a result, that provoked a hostile reaction from Thebes, which was of course the biggest city in ancient Greece back then. And then
the irony is, if he hadn't have done that, then Philip wouldn't have ever gone to Thebes, and Philip wouldn't have learnt what he did and reformed the military. There we are. There's a series of events for you.
Go ahead.
Philip II is like a master of warfare.
Right, exactly.
Alexander II went in there, put those garrisons in there, and then ended up messing up his whole allies and get that. I don't think King. This is just speculation; nobody knows. But I don't think King Philip II would have been in charge. I don't think that ever happened. Those garrisons don't.
No, Alexander II, what he did, he poked the bear, and the bear woke up and ate him. because to finish things off, the Theban general drove the Macedonians out of Thessaly, and then he neutralized Alexander by favoring the ambitions of Alexander's brother-in-law, Ptolemy of Anaros, and forced Alexander to abandon his alliance with Athens in favor of Thebes. So basically, Thebes told him, "You better ally with us or else," and don't stop and take out the alliance against with Athens. So basically, stop being Athens' friend and be our friend. And Alexander and then as a course, Alexander II had to hand over his hostages. Philip II. That's where the Philip II comes in when he had to hand over.
Really interesting about this is, as I said, the further we go out is the sequence of events. So if this didn't happen, then that wouldn't have happened. As you're saying, obviously, if you don't have Philip being Philip, then you don't have Alexander being Alexander. But then if you don't have Alexander before Philip being Alexander, then you don't have Philip being able to do what Philip can do as well, especially when it comes to the Athenians, because I'm still amazed by Philip II's masterstroke of taking out the Athenian colonies in Thrace. Because as I said, that was all about logging. That was all about getting all of their ships. So that hits them in their war effort of any wars, but it's not a direct. It's kind of an indirect conflict. Not as indirect as something of, say, Korea or a Vietnam, but really a quite direct. They're fighting against each other, but it's in a territory far away. It's more akin to something like France getting involved in the American War of Independence, along those lines of. But France were fighting, and they saw the opportunity to jump in there and help people get rid of us, and that's kind of what Philip was doing with Athens. He was cutting them off from places and isolating them, which is what was making them worried. But if it had gone the other way and Alexander had remained allied with Athens, would it have been that way with the Thebans? But the Thebans didn't have those colonies up in Thrace that you could use to sort of hound them into that one place. But then again, allied with the Athenians and their strong navy, could that then have made that easier? The crossing into Persia could have been easier. It would have completely changed the course of history. How much, obviously, we'll never know. But it's that whole dynasty of people were clearly working and picking up on the previous goals of the previous generation to push them through as well. Because what Philip does, a lot of that is kind of what Alexander II was doing. And then what Alexander the Great does is kind of what Philip was doing. They just dial it up a little bit each time as well. So it's more of a dynastic ideal of what they want. More today, we think of it as what a country wants, of who a country would support in a conflict or who they would supply arms to, because it gives them an advantage against a secondary opponent on the world stage. It's that diplomatic wrangling as well is not something that Macedon was known for earlier on. It's as this group of people in this dynasty start coming around that you start seeing this more and more and more, that they're using this strong diplomacy and military ability to their advantage to increase the holdings of the dynasty. It's more, we're doing this for the family rather than for ourselves. But obviously, they were still self-centric. They were still doing it for themselves, but their dynasty then profited from what they had done throughout all of that. I find very interesting. The more that we move out, you can still see these connections of each of them trying to do basically the same thing until it's done. Angel,
I noticed.
Yeah, sorry, your mute didn't come off.
The funny thing is, I mean,
don't know if it's me or him.
Yeah. What I was saying, we talk about Alexander.
Oh no, it's definitely Angel.
The second, Alexander the First. You know, Alexander the First was kind of forgotten in all this.
Yeah. There's this whole dynasty of people essentially putting Macedon on the map as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you think when Philip II was reforming the army of Macedon, do you think anybody was even looking in his direction, saying, "Oh, wait, what's he doing?" Or do you think he caught them by complete surprise, having that discipline of an army coming out of it?
That's a very good question. I think that they must have been keeping an eye, because it was a very big thing with the Greeks, where you had people moving around between the cities who were from that city as well. This is the time of Aristotle. These the philosophers moving around and teaching people these ideas, and it's bringing up new ideas. And a lot of the we've still got some of that element of the classical era, where we sort of, when we go back with the modern ideas of things, where we always see a lot of their roots as well. They were looking at that, but I think it would be more like sort of the Japanese being in Italy when we destroyed the Italian Navy at the beginning of the Second World War. And then they use that as part of their plan to take Pearl Harbor, more as these people are doing something interesting, perhaps we could incorporate that in our army, rather than they're going to turn around and use that army against us. Obviously, the Athenians, when he starts taking out all their colonies, they're probably starting to go, here, hang on a minute, we need to do something about this, obviously, and start gathering allies. But I think at first it's more because each of if you look at, say, Sparta's got one way of fighting, Athens has got another way, the Thebans have got a different way, and there's obviously other different ways if you really look into sort of the Greek military thought throughout this period. Obviously, there's smaller elements that come into it. These so often based on how their land is as well. Obviously, Athenians, where they are big on their navy. The Spartans, because of their culture, big on the way that they were fighting, that martial prowess thing. The Thebans with the sacred band, and it's just. And then if you go obviously north of Macedon, you're getting into horse tribe territory as well. There are horse archers that we have to name every single episode. So you've got all of these elements, and there's a lot of this change happening at the time of people trying. If you think of the phalanx has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years by this point. So it's, he's trying something new with this. Until they see it in battle, people have tried new things quite a lot around this time period. If you look at the development of the Athenian Navy, for example, the development of the Athenian Navy, they came up with some weird and wonderful ideas with their ships. And there's like the quirkier, obviously later on, the Romans picked up a lot on this with the crazy naval ideas, and obviously, and the Romans weren't particularly a naval people for a long time. But you get this sort of idea of people are trying new things. They're seeing something. They're trying something new. And one of the big things in Greece was obviously because there's not huge amounts of flat land. Having a unit that has bigger spears could also be seen as a detriment in certain areas, but it's that training to use that overcomes that usage of that as well. It's like if you look at any battle with a phalanx as well, it's the way that a phalanx collapses is nearly always in the same way. The way that you attack a phalanx is in a different way. If you look at Thermopylae, that's quite an interesting one of how they change their formations and they try new things. The Greeks weren't averse to trying new things with the phalanx. It's that added element of Philip training them as well. So I think they would have looked at it with interest, and then the Athenians, obviously, with these conflicts continually going on with them, would have started turning around and going, actually, did you see what they just did to the Illyrians? right, we need some allies here because we need a way of dealing with this. And they just don't have time to come up with a way of dealing with it later on. Which is obviously something that we will eventually get onto, this war with Athens that really solidifies Philip's reputation in mainland Greece. The big war that comes out of this, rather than this taking Thrace and settling everything west, east, and north of Macedon, so you can concentrate on the south. Because realistically, up until that point where he's really properly fighting Athens, is where he's fighting in Greece. It's in essentially civil wars. Essentially, he's getting himself involved in conflicts as an ally and fighting. Yes, he's taking areas for himself, but he's not going out there to conquer the whole Hellenic world at that point as well. It's not until he really starts properly honing down and tangling with Athens and their allies that this starts to become a real issue for the Greeks. So up until that point, I think they're more interested, intrigued, a little bit worried, wanting to find a way to counter it. But more than that, I don't think that they really saw what was coming until
that's why I asked that question about do you think they knew what was coming or not? Because even if you look at it under Alexander II, he played defense. Okay, cool. He defended. And then the Civil War thing, he was looked at as little brother. Oh, let's get little brother involved in our Civil War to help us out. Yeah. And then all of a sudden King Philip comes and says, here I am.
Yeah, I'm here to save the day.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that's gonna do it for this one. We're gonna cut it right there. I think that's the perfect point to cut it. The next episode, we're gonna get into the campaigns of Philip II. We didn't get too much into the campaigns. We want to say that for the second episode. Yeah. So, but this was a really fun start, and so I think we really set the scene of what Philip was all about and his brothers and his relationship. And we're also gonna get into his relationship with Alexander III, his son. So that, because I know there was some things about that. But before we go, I wanted to do a little bit of a plug here for our charity anthology that we're doing for Lee's daughter. So I mean, I did a story, Aiden's doing a story, and Lee.
We have a lot of authors that are donating their time, their stories, their editing to get this going, and 100% of all the proceeds go to finding a cure for NKH. If you guys want to look that up, that's non-ketotic hypoglycemia. It is a terminal illness that has less than 500 people in the world is affected by. So the government don't care. We don't get grants. The parents have to raise all the money to get the doctors to look for a cure. So
that's so a really good cause, guys. The idea, the plan is to get it out before October. DJ Cooper will be doing the cover for us, so thank you, D Cooper, for helping us out. And I think she's doing a story, if I'm not mistaken.
She's doing a story too and publishing it. It's going to be coming out through Angry Eagle.
Yep, Angry Eagle Publishing. We got Chris Philbrook. Chris Bonner, we got
Carl Meadows, Scott Baker.
We got all kinds of old stars in there.
I mean, we have so many. I'd have to get the list out. There's a lot. It's going to be really good, and I can't wait for it to happen. And Saltzman's actually doing the audio part, so it's going to be an audio book. I got Saltzman donating that.
Oh wow!
Excellent.
Paperback, digital, and audio.
This is gonna be so wonderful, guys. When Lee came up with the idea and Aiden came up with the idea, I said, yeah, let's do it. Let's go all in on it because it's nothing. I'm like, because I did an anthology when I was doing Lit RPG. You were there with me, Aiden, with Stephen Andrews.
That was pretty much how we met, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was how we met for the anthology for Australia, for the Australian wildfires back in 2020. So I did a little story for myself and Aiden, and I like the story, Aiden, by the way. So I'm looking forward to it.
Aiden came up with the idea for my daughter's one, and I think he went with you and me at the same time and was like, hey, why don't we do something like this? He might have actually went with you first, and then you guys came to me. But I'm definitely grateful. It'll be nice.
Yeah. So, guys, be on the lookout for that. And before we go, Aiden, where can we find you?
Usual places. Everything's under my name. Amazon, Drive-Thru RPG. Drive-Thru RPG is slightly different. AC Cartography, but on Facebook, it's search for my name. I've got an author and a cartography page that you can go and look at there, and then they'll show you where else to go.
All right, and me, just Angelus Maximus on Facebook, Angel Ramon on the Facebook as well. And I'm everywhere, guys. I mean, if you see me, I'm everywhere. You know, you could find me everywhere on Facebook and all that. And I can't wait to read Nee's debut story. I think this is your first story, right, Nee?
Correct.
Yes. Can't wait to read it, man. Can't wait to read it. Well,
I
guys,
think I might have the biggest story. Not to cut you off, sorry. I might have the biggest story in the thing. I think I almost am at 12,000 words.
Oh wow, that's a decent.
Wow, that's good. That's quite good. That's quite design. Yeah, can't wait to read your stories, guys. Well, guys, that's gonna do it for this episode. Join us in 2 weeks as we go deeper into Phillip II, NATO campaigns, and his relationship with Alexander the Great. But until then, guys, this has been Tertullian Angelus Maximus. That's been the Gate, Aiden Cordier, and that is our boy, Need Edwards. And we will see you in 2 weeks. See you then.
Take care, guys.
Bye.